astTECS, leading enterprise telecom brand.
Convert your IP based, your analog based, or in new setups to have an analog IP based solution. So without further delay, so when the outline of this whole webinar or the flow for this webinar would be more about astPA, what are zones. So zones are what are zones, or why we have put this right in the beginning of the webinar is so that we wanted you to understand what zones or what our definition of zones in the PA solution was, so that later on when we go through the presentation, it's easier to understand what is happening in the, like what is the whole solution around, because zones are a very, or are one of the premium parts of the whole solution. So getting clarity on something like this would help you throughout the whole webinar. Next, we would talk about single premise models, multi-premise models, the admin interface where the configuration is done, the manager interface, the person who uses this on a day-to-day basis, multiple models of deployment. So that would be similar to the single premise and multi-premise model, but in a little more detail where we show you, it takes you through how the whole network works. Then finally, once we cover all that and everyone has a good idea of the solution as such, we would take up the main question: why the solution, why IP-based solutions are taking over an old, well-defined industry. Then we'll go through the multiple use cases. Yeah. So that's the whole flow of the webinar. Just like Firdausi said before, if you have any doubts or queries, please feel free to leave it in the chat. We would, at the end of the webinar, we would come back to all this and make sure we answer each and every one of your questions. So let's begin. So first thing is about astPA. So the PA in astPA stands for public announcement. So it is a public announcement. It is a public announcement service. So you have an IP based public announcement service. So all these years, what is in the market is analog based public announcement systems, where it would be just analog lines that are laid. It's copper lines. Now the advantage of this is it is a networking line. It is internet lines that are laid, Ethernet lines, where your system becomes completely over the network. So an advantage of having this is that you have your range, or your scope of implementation of an IP-based system is worldwide. As long as there is a network, your system all across the world can act as a single unit. So you can communicate to large groups of people, or from a single location or from multiple locations. So more definition on this would be understood as we progress throughout the webinar. Now, yeah, so this is the part I told you about. We wanted everyone to understand what zones are before we went ahead with the presentation. So what are zones? Zones are a group of speakers. You can define zones as a group of speakers. So in a solution where you have, for example, if you see the diagram on the side, you have zone 1, zone 2, and zone 3. Now in zone 1, we have a group of 2 speakers. In zone 2, we have a group of 3 speakers, and in zone 3, we have a group of 5 speakers. Now a user, or the controller, the manager of the system, can make an announcement to not just one speaker or not just one zone. So if he makes an announcement to a zone, so say for example, he makes an announcement to zone 1, it would automatically or simultaneously announce to zone speaker 2 and speaker 1. Similarly, if he announces zone 2, it would go to 3, 4, and 5. Now, that does not mean he does not have control over announcing to just one speaker. So at the same time, he can announce to different speakers. So zones, like it's mentioned here, zones would be a group of speakers. You can think of it as a cluster, a collection of speakers or collection of announcement devices is called a zone. Now, when we say a collection of announcement devices in an analog based setup, you can also have zones where you have an amplifier, and from your amplifier, you connect 10 speakers. What that essentially does is all your 10 speakers act as an amplifier. Any sound sent to the amplifier would be relayed onto the set 10 speakers and music would play. But now the thing is, there are two main factors. Firstly, you cannot have individual control over any of those 10 speakers. Your amplifier acts as your control unit. Now, secondly, when one say, for example, in the same diagram that we have mentioned here, if you see zone 3 has all the speakers that are configured in zone 2 and zone 1. So there is no hard boundary when it comes to an IP-based solution that your speakers must be only in one zone. You can mix and match speakers into multiple zones based on your use case. A good example of this would be that, for example, think of it in a classroom. So you have grade 1. In grade 1, you have class 1A, 1B, and 1C. Now the principal, say each classroom has 2 speakers each. Now what the principal can do is he can make a zone called 1A where there's speaker 1 and 2, make a zone called 1B where there's speakers 2 and 3, no, 3 and 4, and then speakers 5 and 6 in class 1C. But at the same time, he can make a single zone and call it first grade. So if say the principal wants to announce a message to the whole of first grade, he could make the announcement. He could select the first grade zone and make the announcement. But if he only wanted to make an announcement to 1A, he could just make an announcement to 1A classroom. At the same time, if there were multiple groups set like this throughout the school and you want to make an announcement throughout the school, that would be also possible. So that's the basic definition of zones. Zones give you a high level of flexibility and scalability. So when moving to a bigger model or a more upgraded model, one of the key features we look for nowadays is scalability and flexibility, which is offered by using one of the principles is zones. So I hope this is clear for everyone. If not, we can reiterate this when we go to the end if anyone still has doubts. For those of you who have joined, we haven't gone ahead much. We've just talked about zones. The main parts are also coming ahead. Yeah. So moving to the next part. So the next part is the network infrastructure. So now in a PA model, like I mentioned before, zones are a crucial element. Now, if you can see the diagram that we have laid out, this is a single premise model. So what we mean by a single premise model is that you have a office building and everything is within that office building. So all your speakers are connected to the local network within the office. So if you can see the diagram as well, you have meeting rooms on your right side, meeting room 1, meeting room 2, meeting room 3. These meeting rooms are classified as one zone. Now, common area and manager cabin are defined as another zone. And then the visitors area or the entrance is defined as another zone. Now, that you can segregate zones, and then you can also adjust the speaker volume for individual speakers based on where they are placed in the zone. So a louder environment, for example, take the visitors area. The visitors area would require a louder environment compared to the meeting room. So you can individually increase the volume of the visitors area. Also, what is being played. So you can, once we come to the manager interface, you can see there is provisions to just select saying that in the visitors area, you want, say, a tune or a song to be played. Throughout the day, a song can be played in the visitors area. And in the common area, only important announcements would be played, or reminding about sales targets or anything like that. So that common area speaker could be on a different frequency, as in frequency of announcements. So all this is running through the IP network, and modern offices or any system, any office that is coming up obviously does have network infrastructure now. So you're not laying or you're not developing an additional infrastructure to set up speakers. you're using the existing infrastructure rather than in the old models where to put up the speakers, you would also have to lay cables, and it's another whole task of its own. So yeah, so that's about a single premise model. Now, the interesting part comes when you move to a multi-premise model. So now in a multi-premise model, because it is IP based. So again, principal things, scalability and flexibility. In terms of flexibility, since it's an IP based model, you have a central control unit, and you have different offices. You can have it all across the world. Now, if you can if you can have if and you can have offices all across the world. Now, for example, if you have a network connected between the two offices, what you can do is the whole PA system would act as a single unit all across the world. The headquarters can make announcements, and it would not make a difference if I'm sitting in Bangalore and my other office is, say, in China. It doesn't make a difference. If my headquarters wants to make an announcement, it would make an announcement to Bangalore and China simultaneously without affecting it anyway. So there won't it is as good as two people sitting next to each other. So one case, for example, one case for better understanding that we have worked on is when we are working with a nationalized bank. So the nationalized bank had their office in a city, and the difference is that they had branches all across the country. So what they wanted is that any announcements or any sort of setup like that, any announcements or even for security measures or seeing what the cashier is doing, it is regulated by the central security team. Now, this central security team wanted to announce or wanted to connect to each of these locations. So this is a solution we suggested where they could connect over the network, put our IP speakers in place. The main server or the control server would reside in their headquarters. Now, another advantage of this is zones. When zones come into play, same nationalized bank could maybe categorize their banks into the north branch, south branch, and east branch. Say there is something that's supposed to be communicated to the north branch, it would be one click, and all the offices in the north branch could get the announcement. Now, another point is that, say tomorrow they add another branch to the whole setup. So another branch is added to zone 2. It would be as simple as configure the speaker and plug it into their network. And that's it. And then the manager can add it to the zone. And adding elements to the zone is maybe a maximum 30-second task. So how it's added to the zone, how manager makes announcements, all that we'll get to. So I hope we are clear till here. Again, if anybody has any doubts, please feel free to put it in the chat, and we'll take it up one by one at the end. So yeah, so that is the multi-premise model. Now, network diagram. So this is a basic network diagram. We will explain it further in detail. So as the progression of the webinar goes, we will get into more and more detail so that everyone understands it and everyone understands it throughout. So it is a learning curve. So say, for example, now in any model, if it's a single premise or a multi-premise model, you would have a centralized server, you have an admin, you have a manager. So an admin and a manager, the difference in roles is that an admin would be a little more technically sound person who can configure the speaker, configure the zones. The manager would be someone who uses this on a day-to-day basis. So day-to-day basis, as in he's the one who would schedule the announcements, make announcements, all that functionality. So, and maybe in organizations, the admin and manager could be one role, or it could be two different roles. So that depends on the organization structure. Now, then there is all the speakers connected to the network. Obviously, between the speakers and the server, there would be a switch. It's not directly connected to the server. There is a switch. Now, you may be wondering why I've put a GSM gateway or a SIP external SIP PRI line over here. So again, IP-based model, we are a telecom company. We can give that flexibility to the customer. So say now, again, going back to our nationalized bank. So now the nationalized bank has the vice president who wants to make an announcement. Say maybe they have hit their targets for the year, or they've overdone their targets for the year, and the VP wants to congratulate everyone, all the branches at the same time. Now, you cannot, or you might not want to ask the VP to go into the manager cabin where it is a technical room, sit there and make the announcement. Rather, the VP would want to just maybe pick up a phone and make the announcement, which can be done. So we can assign a number for the VP to dial. And once the VP dials the number, he can start talking, and it can be configured to announce all throughout the network. So this is possible. And okay, so a lot of questions might come. What about security and all that? Again, we will discuss that as we go to the webinar. Now, admin interface. So the admin interface, like mentioned before, there is an admin and a manager. So the admin interface, I'll just open my screen. Yeah. So this would be the admin interface. This is where zones are created, zones are managed, zones are edited. So this is the whole process of creation and editing of zones. So say, for example, I'm the technical admin and I've been told to create a zone. So it is as simple as log into the module, add a zone, give it a unique reference, group discussion, webinar, demo, 1, 2, 3. And then I want testing, technical, product, sales, and the cafeteria to run in this zone, and then submit. It is as simple as that. And once that's done, that's it. Your zone is created. Your manager can go and announce the zone. It is a under 10-second task to create the zone. There is no other configuration that is supposed to be done. It is as simple as this. Now, from a technical point of view, extremely simple, extremely manageable, scalability, flexibility, all those checkboxes are ticked. Now, coming back to this, yeah. So that is about the admin interface. So again, like mentioned, admin creates announcement units, edits, creates zones. So he is the main technical brain behind it, or he is the technical manager behind it, rather than a manager whose role is to have a day-to-day interaction with the system. So the manager is the one who would schedule announcements, announce to a zone, announce to a speaker. Now, so he is the main person in charge of the system for its day-to-day functionality. So this is the manager interface. As you can see, let me just refresh this page. As you can see, already the webinar demo 1, 2, 3 that was created with all the different speakers that we wanted to configure is already there. So it's all the web person would have to do, or the manager would have to do, is call the group, and as soon as he dials the group, that's it. It would announce to all devices. Now, like mentioned before, you can call a group, but at the same time, you can announce to individual units. So say now I would only want to announce to the technical department. I can click on the technical and I can make an announcement. So this is for announcement as in a live stream of audio, where the manager wants to actually communicate something live. On the other hand, you can also schedule audio. So what does it mean by scheduling audio? Audio scheduling is for cases where it is a repeated message and you want to have this going on for, say, any duration that's defined. So for example, you have, say, maybe 9 to 5 during work hours, you want to remind people, or you want to remind about sales targets or anything like that, you can do that. Or you want to have uh, a pray the bells ringing in a school. Now in the school, if you want, if you want the bells to ring at, say, you want a bell to ring at 10 o'clock when the school starts, and then every hour after that a different sound for a bell, and maybe when 3:30 when the school gets over, another bell. Now this is very much possible. So that is a whole part of scheduling. So for example, so you would schedule a name, webinar demo schedule. Just choose an audio file, select a start date and end date. So the reason why we have given a start date, end date, is that, say, now it could vary from case to case when you want it. So maybe on festival times, or maybe on some other occasion, you would want to have uh the scheduling. So maybe festival times or some occasion you want prayers to be repeated. Maybe it's a special month where you want prayers to be repeated, or maybe in the school that month is there, they have some other activities, so the timetable is a little shifted. So you want a special different type of timetable where the scheduling is different. So you want different sound intervals. So that is possible. Now, frequency. So if you set a frequency of 0, what it essentially means is the audio would repeatedly play. So, and if you set any other frequency, it would play based on that frequency. So setting it as 1 would play the audio would play every 1 hour. Setting it as 2, every 2 hours, the audio would play. And now zones. So like mentioned before, I can now webinar 1, 2, 3 is a zone that we just created. Now I can say, play this audio in webinar 1, 2, 3, and that's it. It would start, and yeah, so, and then repeat an exception hours. So once you have done that, the schedule would be created. Now, one important thing to note is that when you have schedules like this, you have, say, a scheduled announcement that's constantly repeating. We also have put in a clause or a condition where if an announcement is being played and the manager wants to make an announcement as in a live stream of audio, we give the live stream priority. So the reason why we give the live stream priority is that the announcement of the manager should be overheard and the other audio should mute down. So that is automatically done. So once the announcement of the manager is done, the audio would again pick up and it would automatically play. So all those are already in place. Now, so this is the manager interface. So again, just a quick revision, you can make calls to groups or zones, and then to individual speakers. Wherever whatever the layout is, we can get the layout designed on the right side so that it's always a reference. Now, then other than zones, you can schedule to a zone so that every speaker in the zone plays the same sound. Yeah, so that's about the manager interface. 1 second. Yeah, so again, so admin interface and manager interface. Admin, someone who's more technically inclined, can create, edit, manage zones. Manager, someone who interacts with the system on a day-to-day basis. Now, devices. So we've talked about the speaker, we've talked about how the speaker connects to networks, how the manager does it, how the admin does it, but what are the actual devices? So now for audio input and say audio input or the manager's control, you have different devices varying on the level of comfort. So the most basic way would be to have an IP-based phone. And on that IP-based phone, the manager would have to have, say, he'll have a list of numbers and he can dial the number and then make an announcement, which is more tedious because that list would have to be maintained, and the process of dialing the number every time he has to make an announcement. So that is a more tedious method. Now, a level above that would be having something like this, where it is a phone with a gooseneck mic and fixed buttons, where the manager would still have to have a reference where of what number is mapped to what, but he would not have to dial it. It's a little more quicker, but still in say a mission critical or anything like that where announcements have to be made, it is a little more tedious to do. Rather, the most comfortable and the most user-friendly method would be to have a system that has a manager interface. As you can see here, this is someone who is using the manager interface with the whole option. So he sits there, he sees what announcements are to be scheduled, schedules announcements, create talks on zones, makes announcements. So it is a more comfortable and a more reliable not reliable, but everything is a reliable setup, but more user-friendly setup. So it is, since it is a person that's going to be doing this day in and day out, he would have to, it is understandable to give him a certain level of comfort as well. Now, this is the audio input. Now, announcement devices or our output devices are IP based. So all of them are IP enabled. Everything can be used as a terminal in the network. Now, it would, your IPs or your, no, sorry, not your IPs, your wattage would range from say 6 watts to 10 watts, 20 watts, 30 watts. So depending on what your speaker is. So you can have ceiling speakers, you can have any type of speakers. So now one thing is that all these speakers are PoE speakers. So PoE speakers, so the speakers can work with just connecting it to a PoE switch. You do not have to have an external power line to supply current to the system. The Ethernet cable that's laid, if it's connected to a PoE switch, the other end can power the speaker. So the speaker has a built-in amplifier. It can work as PoE and non-PoE. And yeah, so those are the announcement devices. Now we can go a little more detailed into maybe one of the announcement devices, so for better understanding. So one of the speakers is our 10-watt PoE speaker. So now, as mentioned before, it can work as PoE and non-PoE. So PoE very well. It is connected to a PoE switch, Ethernet line connected to the speaker, and the speaker works. Now, say you don't have that, and you still have the Ethernet line, you can connect the Ethernet line, and then there is a provision to give it the current as well. Now, the speaker isn't that heavy. It's a 2 kg speaker, weather resistant, ideal for indoor and outdoor use. It is aluminum grill and a very rigid body. There is a cloth mesh behind the speaker unit. It's also to prevent dust and other particles from going in. So it is a very good rough and tough speaker. So larger quantities, we can get it in different color schemes, and it depends on the definition for the customer. So it would depend on the quantity, but if the customer is ordering higher quantities, we can adjust since we are the manufacturers of the speakers as well, we can get it in different color schemes as well based on the requirement. Yeah. So yeah. So now coming to, so one thing that happened, one thing we've realized is that when we started talking about the speakers, we had a lot of questions about how this was actually connected in the network. So so I thought maybe in this webinar as well, giving a little clarity about that would help everyone even when they're pitching and talking to customers. So for example, in a single premise model where this is all in one building, you would have your server room, you would have the PA server sitting in the server room, then you would have a network switch. So network switch is managing your whole network. Now you would take one Ethernet cable from your network switch, connect it to the server. Now, as you can see in the bottom, you have zone 1. So now there are 7 speakers in zone 1. there would be 7 Ethernet lines going to each of those speakers. So each of the speakers in zone 1 would have different connections. Similar to that, each speaker in zone 2 would have different connections. So now the advantage is that you have all speakers, again, flexibility and scalability, all speakers acting as a single unit, but at the same time, all speakers acting as individual units as well. So in similar to that. So now what happens is that everything is connected on the IP network, even the controller console, or if it's a phone, connected via the Ethernet cable coming from the switch. Now, when you have this is on this model, you would be in comparison to what's shown here, where say this is your office structure. This would be the this would be more or less the network structure there. Now, the next one is a multiple location model. Okay, so earlier we talked about a multi-premise model where we talked about it distributed all across the country or anywhere, and then we would get it done, which is also possible, but I thought we would shrink it down to just one space to understand. So take, for example, this is a college campus or a school campus. So, okay, say college campus. Now, in the college campus, not all buildings or not all departments are in one building. It could be distributed across multiple buildings. So say one is the computer science building, one is a mechanical block, or this is a hospital where different specializations are in different buildings. So now you have a server room and a network switch, say that is in a completely different building. Now, in this example where we said you just draw lines, it is because it is a single office space. The network lines would have already been drawn, even if it's not much of a hassle. Now, in this case, since it's multiple buildings, you would not want to have, say, for example, you in building 1, you can see there are 7 speakers. You would not want to have 7 cables running from the server room, which is in another building, to building 1. One, because it's not practical. Two, because it would be expensive. Rather, for example, take a simple calculation. If building 1 and 2 had, say, a 50-meter difference, now what would happen is getting a cable from the server room to 7 speakers in building 1 is 350 meters of Ethernet cable. Rather, if you do it where you had a switch here and a switch in building 1, all you would have to do is 150-meter cable that goes to switch 1, and say there's 10 meters between between the switch in building 1 and all the speakers, so that's 70 meters. So instead of having 350 meters of cable, essentially you are just having 120 meters of cable, which is a huge cost save. So similarly, you can have switches in each building, and those switches would finally distribute the network to the speakers. So models like this are tested and proven. So we have also tested it this way. So you have a server room network switch. The network switch would connect to other switches. Those switches would internally distribute all the network, or distribute it to all the speakers or announcement devices within the network. And just not announcement devices, even for the controller and any other system there is. Yeah. So I hope everyone's clear to here. And now, yeah, again, if you have any doubts or questions, you can always please leave it in the chat, and then we can go through it. Yeah. So now coming to the big question again, why IP-based models are taking over. So like mentioned before, scalability, flexibility, huge things in the IP, or huge things in any business scalability. Now, you can announce to a single zone or speaker. So like mentioned before, so in an analog case, you have one of two options. You can either announce to the analog speaker only, or you can announce to a set of analog speakers that are connected via the amplifier. You cannot have a structure or a model where you can do both functionalities. So when setting up the system, you have your speaker, and maybe your speaker is directly connected to the announcement controller, or you have a group of speakers connected to the amplifier, and then amplifier is connected to the controller. But in case of an IP based model, you can have announcement to the IP speaker and announcement to a group of speakers. So in an analog system, it is an or. In IP speaker, it is an and. So analog, so that is one big difference of the whole model. And then scheduling also to based on what how you would want to do it. And so it gives managers as well a higher level of comfort, flexibility to perform day-to-day actions. Now, built-in PoE, no extra lines would have to be laid. If your switch supports PoE and you can pass current through it, so then you would not have to lay extra power built in. It saves you on huge costs. Remote access. So remote access is coming back to this example. Let me just pull up that slide. So yeah, so remote access is like we mentioned before. You have an external call, you have SIP, you have external call. So okay, one method of remote access is that your manager has your server has a public IP and your manager announces from that. But again, external calls, SIP, PRI, your anyone can, you can configure a phone number to the system, and then the system you can make announcements. So now when I was giving that example, we did mention that say for what happens if someone else gets a hold of this number. So what an additional level of security that can be done is you can set a pin. So once a pin is set, you can say that once a person makes a call, he has to enter a pin, and only if he enters a pin is he allowed to make the announcement. Now, say it is a larger group of people who have to make the announcement. So if it is a larger group of people who have to make the announcement, we can set separate pins for each person. Same mobile number, same published number, but a large different groups, different pins. So an advantage of this is even if the system, someone gets hold of a pin and makes an announcement, which is not actually approved, which is a faulty announcement, you can get a hold of which pin was leaked and then take corrective measures just for that. So you can have a single DID, multiple pins, and since every call or every announcement in the system is logged, you will exactly know which pin, which announcement, what is played, and then you can hear the recording also. So that is another feature where everything in the system, every announcement in the system is recorded. Now, 1 second. Yeah. Speaker failure does not affect other speakers. So big thing for scalability, each speaker again is an individual unit. So if say in 100, you have in an analog system, if you had 100 speakers, a lot of it is connected serially. So in serial, when you have some sort of connection like that, or the amplifier is connected, anything like that, any of those systems go down, the whole system or the whole of that leg fails. Now, in an IP based system, if any speaker goes down, it is only the announcement to that speaker that fails. So the speaker itself is automatically isolated. You do not have to, it does not affect the rest of your network, which is very crucial in say high-risk environments or somewhere where making announcements is very important. You need to have that sort of assurance that a single failure is not affecting the whole system. Then coming to the next one, scheduling announcements, very extremely friendly GUI. As we saw, it takes you less than 10 seconds to actually schedule announcements on the system. Your announcements could be played to a zone or to individual speakers. Announcement, you can control the periodicity of the announcement, so it continuously, or so again, so it gives you it gives the manager very high control over what actually happens in the system. Easy to scale, easy to connect, similar to what's mentioned in the whole example for say a branch. So okay, obviously when it is a analog based system, you don't have the provision to have it distributed all across the country and still act as a single unit, unless they are very ambitious and lay analog lines throughout the country, which is not practical at that point. But now, like the same example, when they open another branch, all they would have to do is, anyway the network is connected, plug it in and they're good to go. So the configuration of speaker is a very small task, creating zone is very small task, manager making announcements is a very small task. So from the starting to the end, everyone's workload is actually not much, because the whole IP based system takes over the rest of the burden for them. So and say now you have speakers that are in place and tomorrow they want to have IP based cameras. Your Ethernet lines are already there. So using the same lines, you can now have IP cameras and everyone's moving to a whole IP based system. Now, distributor announcement points, just like the example I said before, are all across the country, all across the world. The beauty of the IP-based solution is that you are not bound by cables. You are in your scope of creating a unit or creating a group or having your whole system work as a unit is as flexible as wherever there is network. So wherever the internet can touch you, you can technically, by in theory, have a speaker plugged in. So those are one of the main key points, but not all, but one of the main key points why IP-based models are taking over the old established analog-based models. Now, use cases. When we talk about use cases, we have schools. So schools, like mentioned before, you can schedule announcements. Um, you can schedule announcements. You can have 1 second. Can you please give me? Sorry about that. Yeah. So when you have, say, for example, schools or any when in schools you want to make announcements to classrooms, you can create zones, you can create multiple other setups. Maybe the ground has a different bell once lunch is done. Now assemblies, classroom assemblies, principals want to call students to the office, parents, any sort of system like that could happen in schools. Hospitals, no, hospitals you can have zones, so you can have different announcements in different types of zones. Just like our office example, maybe the visitors area has a different announcement, as well as has a higher volume set. But at the same time, in the say the ICU, where it's supposed to be quieter, you don't have announcements unless it is urgent, um, and it is a lower volume set. Now, even integration with other systems, say, for example, in the hospitals, you have in the visitors area, you have a token system. Now, this token system, you would want to announce it on the speaker. So maybe you have a general announcement that's playing, and then when someone's token number is on, or you've reached the token number, we can integrate it with the token system to play the announcement saying token number so and so, please go to counter so and so. So systems like that can be developed, it can be integrated. Extremely programmable system. So next we have malls, special offers, special announcements, lost items. Many times we can also see in malls that when children are lost, the security announces on the speaker saying there is a lost child at the security. So all that can be implemented. Alerts, maybe there is a fire hazard, you want everyone to evacuate the mall. All that can be done. Now, banks announcements of new policies, notifications, general awareness, holiday announcements. Now, even things like, say now the branch has a new policy, which the branch wants to intimate to all customers, but it has maybe already told or published the article and tried communicating, but also the policy now for the branch is maybe during the first month when the policy is in place, it has to announce every day in the branch. Now, how does it ensure that it has announced every day in the branch? Maybe the end of the month, if a customer comes and tells you he didn't hear the announcement, the branch always has proof that the announcements were made, because every announcement is timestamped and logged in the system. So everything has all the announcements in the PA system are announced, are recorded. Now, general public. So again, PA system is public announcement. So anywhere publicly available, you can have this. So large scope. So the examples we have defined are small, or we have defined are one of the few places you can say. Places we haven't talked about is railways, airports, any public space for that matter, parks, gyms, anything. So anywhere where there's a group of people, you can have a public announcement, or there is generally a public announcement. It's just that it might not have been obvious till now, but go around, see what's happening. There are public announcement systems all around us. So hopefully after this webinar, everyone takes note of this and is running in the back of your mind, and whenever there is a public announcement, you realize, yes, that is a scope for another public announcement. So coming to models, now we have models starting from 100. astPA 100 would essentially mean the hardware or the server supports 100 announcement units, but we have also lower models where it is, say, astPA 25, 50. So it is for smaller use cases. Now, the main difference between astPA 100, 500, 1000 is that the concurrency, so parallel sessions. Now, when we say astPA 100 has, okay, so one thing is that it supports 100 speakers. Now, in 100 speakers, you can have 10 parallel sessions. That does not mean that you can only announce to 10 speakers at once. Rather, it means you can have 10 different announcements at once. So to take an example, if you have, say, 3 zones, you have 100 speakers. Now in 100 speakers, you have 3 zones, where zone 1 has 40 speakers, zone 2 has 40 speakers, zone 3 has 30 speakers. Now to make an announcement, to you say, for example, at the same time you want to make announcement to 3 different zones of 3 different announcements, your number of parallel sessions are still 3, but actually you are announcing to 100 speakers at once. It's just that your parallel sessions are just 3 speakers. So astPA 100 gives you the flexibility to announce up to 10 sessions, 500 gives you the flexibility to announce up to 50 sessions, and 1000 gives you an announcement to announce up to 100 sessions. So other than that, the difference is that PA 100 supports 100 speakers, 500 speakers, and 1000 PA 1000 supports 1000 speakers. Yeah, so that is the webinar on the PA solution. Again, if you have any doubts, clarifications, please leave it in the chat. I hope it was an informative webinar and everyone has something to take back from this. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Abu, for a wonderful presentations and giving us the detailed inputs for our newly launched products as IP-based PA system. We have multiple questions that comes from our participants. So moving on to the question and answer sessions, we'll start with the Mr. Sukhvinder Singh. His question is, why would someone use PA system if a message can be delivered via other means like emails or WhatsApp?
Okay, so see, delivered via email or WhatsApp, you would have to know what the person's email or WhatsApp is. So when you're in a hospital, you want to make an announcement. You don't have everyone's email or WhatsApp to make the announcement. Another point is you want people to hear it. So public announcement system is to announce to everyone present, which you would not be able to do via email or WhatsApp. I hope that makes it clear.
Mr. Sukhzinder, I hope your question has been clarified. If you have further, you can switch on your mic and ask the questions. And also, before continuing it, I would like to remind all the participants, please drop your queries in the chat box, or you can just unmute yourself and ask the questions. In the meanwhile, Abu, you can just take down the presentation so that we can have one-to-one discussions.
Yes.
Okay. Let's move on to second questions. The second question has come from Mr. Amulia. Like in the railway stations, when the train is there, lot of crowd, can it sense the environment, additional volume, can automated manage for the announcement?
Yes, so we are bringing up a model where it will recognize the environment sound and then automatically adjust what the level of audio is. So yes, that is possible, completely possible.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next question has come from Mr. Hamid. His question is, can we have a different bell sound in different zones in a school environment?
Yes, so like the example that we said before, you can have different zones having different audio, so different bell sounds. Yes, completely possible. You can also have within your same schedule, you can have different audio sounds, and yes.
Okay. Next question is from Miss Blazing. Do you have a speaker which can be installed in wet environment, cold rooms, or a noise environment?
Wet rooms would we would need to know what the exact how wet. So this is water resistant but not waterproof. So you can't submerge it in the water, but it can resist water up to a certain level.
I hope Blessings, your query is answered. If not, you can unmute and ask if you need further clarifications. Okay, let's move on to next question. And next question has come from Mr. Edward. If my network switch runs out of a port and I need to create more zones, do I need to go in for another network switch?
Okay, so the number of ports on your network switch would only affect the number of speakers you can connect. So if your network switch runs out, you can always connect your network switch to another network switch and then connect more speakers. The number of zones, we do not have any restriction on. You can create as many zones as you want. So given 10 speakers, you can mix and match it to create n number of zones. I hope that makes it clear, Mr. Edward.
Yeah. Okay, another next question has also come from Ms. Blazing. On multiple deployment, can I have a zones beyond router to remote branches?
Yes, so again, like we mentioned before, the restriction is only on how far your network can reach. So if your network reaches to that point and you have access, yes, it will work.
Okay, Mr. Satish would like to know, can we use PA across a city to city or country to country? If yes, we need any internet facility in voice scenario, can we use the firewall in the PA, how it works?
Okay, so when you have a city to city or country to country setup, yes, so you can either have your server, the PA server that's on a public network, and so it has a public IP, and then all the speakers are configured to that. So whichever location it is, you connect the speakers also to the internet and then configure it. But also what we have seen is what companies are doing is they tunnel networks. So you create tunnels between your primary network, which is managing the server, to whichever branch you want, and then connect it. So overall, it does come within the same network. So that could be via VPN or yeah. So you can use a firewall. Exactly. I hope that answers your question.
Thanks, Abu.
Okay. Next question has come from Miss Blessing again. In the event I don't have a PoE switch, what PoE injector can I use powering a speakers if main powers is not an option?
Okay, so you can, yes, so you can use normal PoE injectors as well. So if you don't have main power and you don't have a PoE switch, yes, you can take it from your switch, put it through a PoE injector, and then it will still work. Yes, that is possible. What PoE switch you can check, there are multiple available in the market. So it depends on your use case.
Okay. I hope Blessings, your questions have been answered. If not, can you you can unmute and ask the clarifications. Again, the next question is come from Mr. Satish. Can we use SIP-based IP phone or a soft phone instead of mic for the announcement?
Yes, you can. So like the presentation where you saw the multiple input devices, you can have a SIP-based IP phone or a soft phone for making announcements. It's just that if you want to see what the varying levels of flexibility or comfort the manager has just using those phones, but it is completely possible.
Thanks, Abu.
Okay.
Thank you.
Miss Poonam wants to know what is the power watt of your box speaker?
So box speakers we have from 10 watts, and yes, we do have ceiling IP speakers as well. Yes.
Okay. Her next question is okay. You
Yeah,
have already answered. Yeah. Well, next question has come from Valentine Simofa. What are the core advantages that SPA has over the traditional mic and the speaker that are connected for the public announcement?
Okay, so Mr. Valentin, like we mentioned in the last part of the presentation, there are multiple advantages over the existing or traditional mic and speaker setup. But one of the few things that come into play is your flexibility, your number of announcement points, having a distributed network, scheduling, the zone creation, all that. So what we can do is, if you want to go through that and when you're approaching clients, you want to show that as well, we will share the presentation as well in after the end of the webinar to everyone who's participated. So you can always go through that and let us know if you have any other doubts. Yeah.
Okay. Next question has come from Miss Poonam again. In future, do you have any plan to add a SIP-based paging microphone for the announcement instead of IP connect?
Yes, you can do that. So even in the current system, you can. So it doesn't have to be a future requirement. Even in the current requirement, you can do that.
Next question is from Edward. Can a poor or a bad network affect the delivery or the sound quality of the announcement?
So it doesn't affect the sound quality, but delivery of the announcement might be affected depending on, say, if you have very bad network. Yes, it can affect the delivery, as the network has to get the data from the server, but otherwise the quality of sound doesn't matter. That is not affected.
Thank you, Abu. This has come to the end of our question and answer sessions. If anybody has any further queries, you can just unmute yourself or put your questions in the chat box so that we can attend before we wrap up.
Hello, this is Mark Hakim, and I'm sorry, maybe you guys answer my question. Hello,
Yeah.
Abu.
Hi, how are you?
I think I missed my question. I have a couple of questions.
Go ahead, Mark. Yes.
Yeah. You know, the old days phone system normally like has a speaker and has a button says paging, so anybody can page or make an announcement there if they're allowed to have that button to be active. So in our situation, as you know, we have like multiple location. Can we, and we are on the phone. So let's say my department, my collection department, they're on the phone and somebody make an announcement through the headset. Is that person on the phone call will be listening to the announcement through the headphones, or it cannot be announce it through this headphone. It has to be an actual speaker in a room.
No, so okay, so the scenario you're talking about is slightly different, Mark, where you are trying to get stop of running phone call and then the announcement is playing, which is not something that we are actually adding to the feature list here of the public announcement system. But yes, so what we're talking about here would be more of having a system where it plays through speakers. But okay, so your requirement also, we can look into it. We can, maybe me, you and Roshan can talk about if you need something like that, we can see what feasibility that is.
Or it doesn't have to be in the actual headset, but also, you know, also we have an IP phone on the desk, and the IP phone has a speaker. Most of them has a speaker. So maybe it can be announced through that speaker.
We can check the feasibility of that as well. That can be,
Yeah.
we can check that. Yeah. Maybe we
And
can.
I don't know the future. In the future, maybe if that's something like, I know that was I don't know where exactly what company I work for. So they have an announcement, and if you're on the phone, the announcement will not be delivered to you after you finish your call and hang up. When the speaker is available or the headset available, then you will get the announcement. So it's like, for example, I can listen to the announcement because I'm not on the phone, but my colleague next to me, next cubicle, he's in the phone. He will not listen to the phone. Once he finishes the call, says announcement, he will listen to the announcement like after he finishes call, but he will not miss it. Like it kind of delay until the speaker available. Yeah,
more like adding wait, making something wait in the queue before. Yeah, so it is not. Yeah, so right now the IP or the PS system that we are showing is not of that model, but yes, that is doable.
Yeah, that'll be nice. And I think the last question I have asked, I came a little bit late. So let's say I want to have every single Monday a reminder to a department saying, and we recorded, and we said we have a new week or we are at the end of the month. We can have every Monday the same ones keep playing by automatically.
Yes, scheduling is possible, Mark. You can do it.
It's text to speech available.
Do you want, okay, if it's a scheduled voicemail, why would you need text to speech? But yeah, okay, we can see. So things like integrating into the text to speech or things like that, we can do.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Mark.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Abu. Okay. Anybody who has a further query, we can discuss. So this has come to an end of this webinar session. Thank you everyone for joining this webinar. We be sharing the recording sessions and the PPT. You can check in your inbox after the webinar, and we will come back with an interesting topic in next quarter for the next webinar. Till then, we say goodbye and take care.
Thank you everyone for joining.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.